Hey everyone, this is the Framework laptop, and it's been one of my dream systems since its release in July of 2021. For those who don't know, the Framework laptop is a consumer and right-to-repair focused laptop. It's a modular, repairable device, and recently, Framework has followed their promise for making it upgradable with the release of 12th gen Intel motherboards. Upon the Framework's release, it was loved by many, and I was extremely tempted to pick one up for myself. However, there were two main reasons as to why I didn't get one immediately. The first reason involves my previous purchasing decision. About a week prior to the Framework's release, I had finally bit the bullet on my M1 MacBook Air after contemplating it for months. Lots of consideration went into deciding if the M1 was my next machine, and I didn't want to spontaneously cancel my order to buy a Framework. The second reason was my concern about the longevity of the company. Because Framework was a brand new company and they created a device so consumer friendly, repairable, and affordable, many were weary about their profitability in the long run. I didn't want to purchase a product that couldn't maintain the promises they had made, so I hesitated. For the next year or so, I kept a close eye on them, and I am happy to see Framework seems to be doing well. So I pre-ordered my Batch 3 12th Gen unit. While I deeply love my M1 Air, I do have three main reasons for needing a second machine. My first problem with my MacBook came with virtualization. Because the M1 is based on ARM, I knew it wasn't going to be compatible with x86 virtual machines from the start. I didn't want to pay for a service like Parallels, and UTM was pretty hard to get working consistently. Even when I did get a VM running, the ARM versions of Linux and Windows are pretty underdeveloped, and I wasn't willing to emulate. This was a pretty big problem since virtualization is extremely important for my classes, and the software we utilize isn't very compatible with different architectures. The second reason is modularity. I needed the flexibility to plug in as many antennas, displays, and more if needed. With the Framework, this is easily possible with their modules, as I can simply exchange modules instead of carrying around a Thunderbolt dongle. It's not a complete replacement, but it's nice having the option to choose any port arrangement. Lastly, I wanted to continue supporting the vision of Right to Repair. I've made my fair donations to things like Louis Rossman's GoFundMe, and often purchase parts from iFixit, but I also wanted to support companies that actively endorse sustainability and consumer choice. I believe Framework has done an outstanding job with this so far, and I plan on continuing to support them as long as they stick to their vision. I had purchased the DIY model with an i5-1240p with 4 performance cores and 8 efficiency cores, 16GB of RAM, and a 1TB Corsair MP300 NVMe drive. My modules include 2 USB-C ports, 1 USB-A port, 1 full-size HDMI port, and 1 1TB storage module. I had written an article covering my first impressions with this machine, which will be linked in the description. The TLDR of that is the Framework has been amazing. The build quality is great, I love the taller display, and it's met all of my needs so far. My units panel did have an imperfection where the bottom of the display seemed to refresh significantly slower than the rest of the screen, but Framework had shipped a replacement unit at no cost, and it's been working flawlessly since then. On my Framework, I am running Manjaro and Windows 11 in a dual boot configuration, and it's been a pretty great experience so far. The installation procedure was smooth on Manjaro, but I cannot say the same for Windows. Basically 0 drivers were automatically downloaded, so I had to navigate to the Framework driver installation page without a working trackpad and install it only using my keyboard. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it was just something I figured I'd mention. In the time I've been using this device, I am in love with this keyboard. It has a softer, more oil-resistant texture with tactile switches that have great travel. In fact, the keyboard on the Framework is so great I would actually prefer it over the Magic Keyboard of my MacBook, which was previously the best keyboard I had ever felt. It's seriously so comfortable to type on. The same can be said about the Trackpad. It has a smooth glass surface, which is the perfect surface when transitioning from a MacBook, although mine has a dbrand skin on it. I've always hated non-glass trackpads because, in my experience, the instant my hand starts to sweat, friction becomes a big issue. I can only dream of Framework providing an upgrade to a haptic trackpad to replace the current diving board design, but I'm not sure if the interior space will become an issue to accommodate the motor. Even after my great first impression on the display, I've come to love it even more. With an aspect ratio of 3:2 and a resolution of 2256 by 1504 pixels, I believe this is the perfect display for almost anything. Not only are there usability benefits, but the more square-like build looks better than my MacBook. Since I have a batch 3 unit, mine came included with the upgraded hinges and the lid. The taller display doesn't have an unreasonable wobble, and I can easily open the device with one finger. The only concern I have with the display comes from the removable bezel, as I've noticed some pressure points on the display. Reseating the bezel does help, and while I'm sure it's fine, I'm not exactly comfortable with seeing the mild hot spots. As for the webcam and the microphone, I've actually never used them, but I do love the option of having hardware switches for both. For the sake of the video, I tested out the microphone and camera for the first time, and they're both pretty good. Just right next to the window. It looks pretty alright. It's a 1080p webcam, so it looks a little bit more crisp than other webcams, but yeah, this is pretty cool. However, I cannot say the same for the speakers. They're just not great. They're downfiring, they lose a lot of detail in the mids and lows, and they don't get very loud. Since I'm coming from a MacBook, these speakers could be alright relative to other non-Apple devices, but the transition is pretty jarring. As for the fan, I've never heard it spin up when using Linux, but when doing tasks like gaming on Windows, I finally heard it and it can get fairly loud. It doesn't have any audible whine or high-pitched sounds, so it is very bearable. Air is pulled through the bottom of the device and is exhausted out the back towards the bezel. Because of this, airflow is completely restricted when using the device in clamshell mode, so doing anything intensive basically requires the laptop remain open to prevent thermal throttling. I'm a bit worried about blasting hot air at the base of the display in the long run, but only time will tell how this goes. I haven't seen any problems from users who have purchased previous models, so it might be alright. Following the fan, the battery life on this machine is okay. Since I primarily use Manjaro, I can use the device for about 4 to 5 hours before it gets pretty low. This is with no tinkering to the OS power management at all, and it could get better as I learn to optimize this. I've done some work on Windows, and if I had to guess, the battery life is just about the same, if not a little longer. Moving on to my favorite part of the laptop, the modules. I've had way too much fun swapping and rearranging ports. The initial removal was pretty challenging, but it did get easier with time. I also did have the button's cover fall out on the left side, but it wasn't a big deal since it was easy to glue it back in place. Last but not least, the disassembly procedure of this machine is amazing, and there are so many great features here. With 5 Captic Torque screws on the bottom case, the keyboard can be detached from its magnets with ease. The ribbon cable for the keyboard and trackpad unit is nice and long, so you don't have to worry about ripping the connector right off the board or tearing the cable. What's also nice is they have a reinforcement on the bend here, so if this were to happen, there is a bit more protection to the cable. With the top cover removed, everything is immediately available. Servicing and upgrading this device is insanely easy, and little things like QR codes, additional screws, and small instructions make the repair experience so much better. The same goes for the display. The magnetic bezel can simply be lifted away, and everything you need is immediately visible and held in with screws. Since my original display did have a flaw, I was able to try out the repair process and it was amazingly simple. To conclude the build quality of this machine, I love it all around. It looks great, has high quality components, and is very easy to service. I was trying to determine what the major compromises of the framework are, but other than the speaker location due to the modules and the exhaust on the back to accommodate the 180-degree hinge, there were almost zero compromises that cripples the user experience, quality of the device, or its repairability. I'm seriously so impressed. With the amazing modularity, repairability, and the quality of the framework, how is its performance? At the time of recording, I use my framework mainly for university tasks. From using virtual machines, taking brief notes, and web browsing, the 12th gen CPU has absolutely no problem chewing through these tasks. When I invoke something a little more intensive, such as gaming, I've noticed the performance is actually pretty good. On the native display of 2256 by 1504 pixels, games like League of Legends, Valorant, Muse Dash, and more easily run at 60 FPS with max settings. When it comes to more intensive titles such as Overwatch 2 and Genshin Impact, I do notice I have to fiddle with the settings a bit more. Specifically, Minecraft runs at around 55 to 60 FPS at high settings, Overwatch 2 easily ran at around 45 to 55 FPS at medium and high settings, and Genshin Impact ran at around 30 to 45 FPS with low settings. However, if I do get more into AAA gaming, I do have the option to get myself an eGPU, and now that Framework is Thunderbolt certified, that is a completely reasonable path to take if I wanted to. With that comes the conclusion of my monthly review. With my usage so far, the framework has done everything I needed without any noticeable performance or thermal limitations. I am very happy with this laptop overall, and it's been forever since I felt I can tinker and modify my device without the concern of serialization, artificial bugs, or any anti-consumer traits. I'm eager to see the future products Framework will release, and I plan to support them as long as they stick to their values for repairability and consumer choice. With that, my name is Ren, and this is the Framework Laptop. Also, feel free to check out my weekly newsletter if you haven't already. I'm currently taking a hiatus to focus more on YouTube, but I will be back soon. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye for now.